I hope you're able to see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just to recollect the formula alone, we saw what is thin lens formula. The thin lens formula stated 1 by V minus 1 by U is equal to 1 by F. Similarly, we saw what is lens maker's formula. So what does lens maker's formula state? It is 1 by F is equal to mu2 divided by mu1 into 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. And remember, in the derivation of this formula, we don't use sign convention because all the parameters that are used are unknown to us. They are only general terms. They are not case specific. Sorry. Mu2 by mu1 minus 1 into 1 by R1 minus 1 by R2. Where mu2 represents what?
Medium of lens.
Refractive index of the lens medium. Mu1 represents the refractive index of the outside medium. R1 represents the radius of curvature of the first refracting surface. R2 represents the radius of curvature of the second refracting surface. 1 by F. F stands for focal length. Right? So, as I told you, this topic alone is slightly more important, based on which we will try out few problems. I brought in few problems which are based on lens maker's formula. 1 minute. So let's solve. So you can read the question from my screen, from the screen, and tell me how to solve. So the question is, radius of curvature of each face of a biconcave lens of refractive index 1.5 is 30 centimeter. Calculate the focal length of the lens in air medium. So what have they given us? They have given us a biconcave lens, right? So it has the principal axis and all those things. First refracting surface, second refracting surface. Now, what is the value of R1 and R2? So this has the radius of curvature, this also has the radius of curvature. What is the value of R1 and R2?
30 centimeters.
See, it is minus 30 and plus 30. Whenever I ask you, you need to tell with sign convention. So R1 is minus 30 centimeter, R2 is plus 30 centimeter. Now, outside medium is air, means mu1 is 1. Let the refractive index of the glass be mu2, which is how much? 1.5, or you can take it as 3 by 2, right? So when you solve it, 1 by F is equal to, what is the formula, guys? Mu2 divided by mu1 minus 1 into 1 divided by R1 minus 1 divided by R2. So tell me, logically, for us to find the focal length, there are two formulae. What are they? 1 by V minus 1 by U is equal to 1 by F. Lens formula will also give us focal length, and lens maker's formula will also give us focal length. So if a particular problem comes in an exam, how will you find out whether you need to use lens formula or lens maker's formula?
Refractive index is given.
Very good, very good. It's a good observation, yes. If the refractive indices are given, we need to go only with lens maker's formula, okay? So 1 by F is equal to this thing. So 1 by F is equal to, what is the value of mu2, guys? It is 3 by 2 divided by mu1 is 1 minus 1 into 1 by minus 30 minus 1 by 30. I just substituted it with proper sign convention. So 3 by 2 minus 1 is going to be half. It is minus 2 by 30. This and this will get cancelled, 1 by F. So what is happening here? Focal length is equal to minus 30 centimeter. In this case, what is happening? The focal length is equal to radius of curvature. Is it possible? We learned that focal length is half of the radius of curvature, right? But why, how in this problem, how is it coming exactly equal to 30 centimeter? That is the radius of curvature. Then what difference does it make? Are you guys able to understand what question I'm asking? Right, till now we had been discussing saying that focal length is equal to half of the radius of curvature. But in this problem, we are saying minus 30, and yes, we are able to see that minus 30 is the right answer also. But how is it possible?
Sir, it's
You have,
focal length in
yes,
air, sir.
there also focal length in air only. There we never spoke about medium at all. 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f is still an air medium only. It has nothing to do with medium there. It is because
Lens
I'll show.
not
Lens is not.
curved.
Lens is curved only, ma. Lens. If you use the word lens, at least one of the surface has to be curved. So what did I say here? It is lens maker's formula. This is lens formula, but what is the word before that? It is for a thin lens. Whereas here, what is happening? Here we are not talking about the thickness of the lens at all. We are not concerned about the aperture. Yes. If it is not a thin lens, yes, this kind of a scenario is possible. Are able to understand? That is why in the beginning of the chapter itself, I would have told you one important point. Most of the derivations we do has certain approximations in them, especially with the aperture and all those things. So that formula is for a thin lens. So as far as your syllabus is concerned, yes, by default, whatever question they ask you with respect to lens, it is thin lens only. That's why you're able to use 1 by v minus 1 by u is equal to 1 by f. But here, they told it's a biconcave lens. They never told whether it is a thin lens or a thick lens. They're able to understand. So that is why, because sometime when you do the problem, you might get this doubt. How is the focal length coming out to be radius of curvature? We learned it as r by 2. The doubt will arise. So have this in your mind. So f is equal to r by 2 only for thin lens. I hope I'm clear. Shall we move on to the next one? Now see. The radii is the plural of radius. Right? Radii of curvature of the faces of a double convex lens are 10 centimeter and 15 centimeter. It's a double convex lens. Okay. If the focal length is 12 centimeter, what is the refractive index of the glass? So here, if you observe, the radius of curvature of both the surfaces are not equal. So they are not equiconvex. So one side is having a smaller radius and the other side is going to have a bigger radius of curvature. Okay. 1 and 2. Solution. What is the value of R1, guys?
Minus 10 centimeter.
Hey, R1, ra. For the first surface, where is the center? It is somewhere over here. This will be R1, no? Right side of the optical center.
Oh,
Then what should I? It is 10 centimeter plus. Don't make that mistake. Convex. So minus 15 centimeter. If the focal length is 12 centimeters, so focal length of a convex lens, is it positive or negative?
positive.
It is positive because by default all the objects are kept on left hand side. So when you take the rays parallel to the principal axis, this is where the first focus is going to get formed. So it is going to be positive by a factor 12 centimeter. What is the refractive index of the glass? Again, same thing. So since they have asked what is the refractive index of glass, the outside medium is assumed to be air because no information is given. So again, 1 by f is equal to mu2 by mu1 minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. So 1 by f is equal to, what is mu2 by mu1, guys? 1.5 is, mu2 is mu2 only. That's what we need to find. Sorry. Mu2 divided by mu1 is 1 minus 1 into 1 divided by r1 is plus 10 minus of, accepted. So 1 by 10 plus 1 by 15, what is it? It is 25 divided by 150, which is 1 by 6. Is right? Oh, I didn't substitute f. F is 12. So 1 by 12 is equal to mu2 minus 1 into 1 by 6. I hope you're able to understand. This is 2. So mu2 is equal to 1 plus half. How much is it? 3 by 2, which is exactly 1.5. That is the refractive index. I hope it is clear. Any doubt? I'm expecting questions.
Sir, how is
Yeah.
R2 minus 15 centimeter?
Because see, second refracting surface center will be on which side? Left hand side. So when optical center is taken as the origin, any distance which is measured on the left of the optical center is taken as negative. That is why I put a minus. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Shall I move on to the next one? Now listen. Third, there is a biconvex lens which has a focal length 2 by 3 times the radius of curvature of either surface. Okay. Calculate the refractive index of the lens material. Why did they use the word the radius of curvature of either surface, and what do they mean indirectly? Both the curved surfaces have, fill the blank. Both the
Different
surfaces,
radii.
no, they have the same radius of curvature. That is why they use the word either surface, means both the surfaces are having the same radius of curvature. Okay. So it is a biconvex lens. Bi means both the sides are convex. So can you guys try this? Just give an attempt. No? Just write on your paper. Then I'll do, you can verify whether it is right or wrong. So who can tell me the data? So focal length, how do I write it? It is 2 by 3 times what?
R.
R.
R. Now the question is, focal length, should I take it as positive or negative? Biconvex. Convex lens focal
Positive.
length is positive. So this is positive, this is right, no doubt in it. Now I'm going to use 1 by f is equal to mu2 divided by mu1 minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. Now I need to fill the data in this. So I have focal length in terms of 2 by 3r, because once I saw the question, I had one thought in my mind. Why are there two unknowns? Focal length is not known, r radius is not known, but it can be eliminated with a single equation because they get cancelled out. Right? So 1 divided by focal length is 2 by 3 times r accepted. Mu2, if I take it as mu, which is what we need to find, divided by the outside medium's refractive index is 1. Minus 1, done, into, you need to be very careful with this 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. Tell me properly with sign convention. We have done a problem based on biconvex already. If I take r1 and r2, in terms of magnitude, because of the word either surface, they are the same. But in terms of sign convention, they are not. Tell me the proper sign convention.
R1
1
equal
by
to
R.
R. R2 is equal to minus R.
You're doing the same mistake again. Oh, sorry. You're right. I was wrong. So R1 is R, R2 is minus R. So 1 divided by R minus of 1 divided by minus R. So this will be mu minus 1 into 2 divided by R is equal to 3 by 2 times R. This R and R are gone. So 1 unknown, 1 equation. So mu minus 1 is equal to 3 by 4, which implies mu is equal to 1 plus 3 by 4. 3 by 4. Yes. So it will be 7 by 4. How much is 7 by 4? 1.37. 20 is a balance. 1.75 is the answer. Yes. I hope you're able to understand. So it is 1.75. Okay. Shall I move on to the next one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. The radii of curvature of a double convex lens of glass whose refractive index is 1.5 are in the ratio 1:2. If R1 is R, R2 will be 2R. That is the meaning. This lens renders the rays parallel coming from an illuminated filament at a distance of 6 centimeter. What is the meaning of this? This lens renders the rays coming parallel from an illuminated filament. There is a comma here at a distance of 6 centimeter.
The focus is 6 centimeter.
Exactly. So they have given you the focus because rays parallel to the principal axis converge at focus for a biconvex. Good. So this is the focal length they have given. Calculate the radii of curvature of its surfaces. Same problem with a different way of questioning. 1 by f is equal to mu2 by mu1 minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. So 1 by f is 6. Mu2 is 1.5, that is 3 by 2. Mu1 is 1 divided by 1. So minus 1 into 1 by, if I take R1 as R, R2 will be how much?
minus 2R.
Very good. 2R with a negative sign. So that will be 1 by 2 into 1 by R plus 1 by 2R, correct? So this is 1 by 6. Cancels 3 times. So 1 by 3 is equal to multiply and divide with 2. 3 by 2R, which implies 2R is equal to 9. R will be how much? 4.5. Answer is not given. So R is 4.5 centimeter. That is nothing but R1. Then how much is R2? It will be 9 centimeter. Clear? Okay. Proceeding to the next problem. You can do a problem based on plano convex lens and immersed in another medium. This also. All our book problems and important as well. Okay, let's do it. Find the radius of curvature of the convex lens of a plano convex lens whose focal length, of the convex surface of a plano convex lens whose focal length is 0.3 meter and the refractive index of the material of the lens is 1.5. Tell me how to do. One by f is how much? 0.3. Mu2 is how much? That's what we need to find. Mu2 is 1.5. So that is 3 by 2 divided by 1 minus 1 into 1 by R1 is how much? If I take R1 as R minus 1 by, tell me what is R2?
Infinity.
Very good. So it is infinity. So this will get disappeared. So 1 by 0.3 is 1 by 3 by 10. That is nothing but 10 by 3 is equal to 3 by 2 R. So which implies 2R is equal to 9 by 10. R is equal to 2R is equal to 0.9. R will be 0.45. Did I make any mistake? Or
Sir,
20?
3 by 10.
9 by 10 only, no?
Sir, they're 10 by 3.
No, this will go to the other side. 3 and 3 will get multiplied, no?
Sir, actually it's 3 by 10, sir.
Oh, 3 by 2 minus 1 is,
No,
sorry,
sir,
1
no,
by...
sir, sorry, sir.
Ah.
No, sorry, sir, sorry, sir.
I made a mistake. 3 by 2 minus 1 is half. I made a mistake there. So 2r is equal to 3 by 10. So 2r is 0. Correct only. 0.15 is right. 2r is equal to 0.3. R will be how much? 0.15 centimeter. That's right. Can I go a little fast?
Okay, sir.
Listen. So there is a convex lens of focal length 0.2 meter. Okay. Collect the data. Focal length is 0.2 meter. Is made of a glass of refractive index 1.5. So mu2 is 1.5 and it is immersed in a medium whose refractive index is 1.33. 1.33 is 4 by 3. Okay, remember 1.5 is obviously 3 by 2. So 0.2 is 2 by 10. Find the change in focal length of the lens. So they're asking the change. They're not asking what is the final focal length. See, convex lens of focal length is 0.2 they have given. No, why are they asking the change in focal length? So this focal length, whatever they have given, is in which medium?
Air medium.
Air medium. So 1 by f dash is how much? 1 by f dash will be equal to mu2 by mu1. So 3 by 2 divided by 4 by 3 minus 1 into 1 by r1 is how much, guys? So I don't know the value of r1 and r2. How do I find? I can take it as r minus of 1 by minus r. Accepted? So 9 by 8 minus 1 into 2 by r. Can I write it like this? So 9 by 8 minus 1 is 1 by 8 into 2 by r, 1 by 4r. So what is happening to the focal length? Is it increasing or decreasing? That's what we need to find, no? So if I take this as 1, then the original focal length would have been like this. Now 1 by f is equal to 3 by 2 divided by mu2 is 3 by 2 fixed. In the first scenario, what was the outside medium?
Water.
In the first scenario means when it was 0.2.
Air.
0.2,
Air.
it was
Air.
air medium. So 3 by 2 by 1 minus 1 into, I've taken it as f, be careful. F dash is the new focal length, f is the old focal length. So it will be same 2 by r because I'm going to apply the same logic, it will come out as 2 by r. Is there any doubt in any of the steps? So in the first scenario, f is equal to r. In the second scenario, f dash is equal to 4 times r. So what is the difference in focal length? Delta f is equal to f dash minus f, that is 3r. So 3 into r is 0.2, that is 0.6 centimeter. Approximately 0.58 only. The reason why they got it as 0.5 is because they would have dealt it as 1.5 and 1.33 literally. So I took it as an approximate value. See, 1.5 is exactly 3 by 2, but 1.33 is not exactly 4 by 3. That is why there is a slight difference. But yes, in the exam it is accepted. So it is 0.6 centimeter. Shall I proceed, guys?
Sir, how did R become 0.2?
Where? Here.
Yeah,
See,
in last step.
because f is equal to r. No, I got it.
Okay.
But what is the value of f they have given in the question itself? It is 0.2. So
Right.
that is why I took it as 0. Okay. See, I'll do one last problem, then we'll go to the next concept. I think remaining 4 more problems are there that you can try and come up with doubts. Seventh one, the radii of curvature of double convex lens are 10 centimeter and 20 centimeter respectively. Calculate its focal length when it is immersed in a liquid of refractive index 1.65. State the nature of the lens in the liquid. The refractive index of the glass is 1.5. I'm sure you can do the first part of the question, that is calculating the focal length when it is immersed in water. That part I'm leaving it to you. Okay. But look at the refractive indices and tell me, and try to connect it to the concept which I explained in the previous class, and tell me what will be the nature of the lens in the liquid.
Concave.
It will behave like a concave. Reason?
Because mu2 is less than mu1.
Yes. Mu2 is less than mu1. So whenever there is any lens, it need not be convex only. Any lens when it is immersed into any medium whose refractive index is greater than its own value. For example, in this case, the lens is made up of glass whose refractive index is 1.5, but it is immersed into a medium whose refractive index is greater than 1.5, that is 1.65. Then the nature of the lens will exactly become the opposite. Means a convex will start behaving like concave and the vice versa. So here it is a convex lens, so it starts behaving like a concave lens. What is the value of focal length? You people calculated using the formula. Okay, so all other problems also the same scenario. So with the hope that you people are comfortable with this particular lens makers formula concept, I'm proceeding to the next one. Shall I move on?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, good. So the next concept that we are going to see is prism. See, before we see prism, I just want to add one last point to this lens makers formula. We are seeing 1 by f is equal to mu2 by mu1 minus 1 into 1 divided by r1 minus 1 divided by r2. No? In your 10th grade, you would have learned what is this 1 by f. What is it? Yes, the reciprocal of the focal length is called as the power, which is measured in what?
Diopter.
Yes, it is measured in diopter. Capital D is a symbol used. So, why I told this point is, in some questions, instead of directly asking you the focal length of the lens, they will ask you power. So, what you need to do is apply the same formula 1 by f and all those things. Whatever is the value you are getting, that is directly the power. Don't take the reciprocal of it. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is this lens maker's formula can also be written as power of the lens is equal to mu2 by mu1 minus 1 into 1 by r1 minus 1 by r2. That is the last point. Nothing else outside. Okay. Ensure that the power everything is in terms of meter. So that's it. Now I'll go to the next concept, that is prism. So right now, heading the subtopic that we are going to see is prism. Okay, you have seen this, right? If I'm not wrong, in your 10th grade, you would have done some activity with the prism. Did you ever do it? Those pins and all, poking it on a paper.
Yes, sir.
You've done it, right? So, what exactly does a prism mean? So, the prism which you would have seen in your lab, what shape does it have?
Triangle. Pyramidal.
It has a pyramidal shape. If you see from the front side, you can see it like a triangle also. Right? Actually, how will it be is, it will be something like this. Right? Something like this it will be. But when you see it from this side, okay, then what shape will you be able to see? You will be able to see only a triangle, right? So that's why sometimes they call it as a triangular prism also. But my question is, if I need to give a definition to a material of this kind, where we need to call it as a prism, what will be the definition we'll give it to? For example, I'll give you a hint. Based on that, you think. Okay. If I ask you what does a lens mean? So what is the main objective of lens? Why is lens used? So I need to answer two questions. See, all these devices have something to do with the visible light. They are going to interact with light. Am I right? So what does a lens do? Lens will try to refract the light. If I talk about a mirror, what does a mirror do? What is the principle of a mirror? It needs to reflect whatever light is falling on. Yes. So one thing is clear to me that yes, lens is some transparent material. Okay. So it is a transparent material. When I say transparent, it has the property to refract light. So when the light is trying to travel through this particular transparent medium, what are all the boundaries it is overcoming, or what are all the boundaries it is trying to interact with? That will give me the definition. So can I put the definition like this? Lens is a refracting material where at least one of the refracting surfaces is what?
Spherical.
Curve.
Spherical, or I can call it as curved. Is spherical in nature. That curved surface, we are calling it as spherical. So I'm using the word at least one, right? Because we have a concept of plano-convex and plano-concave also, where one of the surfaces is flat. In a similar way, if I look at this prism, what comes to your mind? So you've already you have seen what a prism is, right? Prism is made up of a glass material. We use glass prism in the lab. Not necessarily it should be made of glass material only. That's a different story. As of now, let's say it's a glass prism. Okay. So is it transparent or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is transparent. If it is transparent, it is going to refract light. It is not going to reflect the light. So when it is refracting light, then my question is, light should overcome what kind of boundaries? Should it overcome a curved boundary or a planar boundary?
Planar boundary.
Planar, because imagine when the light is coming like this, the light has to pass through this plane. You're able to understand? So light has to pass through a plane. So how many plane surfaces should it overcome for it to come out from the other side? If I take this as first side, if I'm expecting the light, if I'm expecting to see from the other side, whenever I say refracting, I can see something from the other side. For example, you take a glass of water, a transparent glass. In this, you pour water. Okay. Let's say there is someone sitting over here. Have you ever tried to observe from this side?
Yes, sir.
So when you do that, will you be able to see or not? You will be able to see in such a way that the light is actually overcoming the, how many curved surfaces? First curved surface and second curved surface. It is overcoming. So it is undergoing two refractions and coming. In a similar way, for a prism, if someone is sitting here, you want to observe from this side. You are the observer. And there is the source whom you're trying to observe. Then the light has to travel from this side. When it is traveling, what are all the interactions it will have with the prism to reach the other side? So what will it do? There will be an incident light. An incident light is hitting a planar surface or a curved surface. That's what is more important for us to answer. So it's hitting a planar surface. So first time, yes, it is hitting a planar surface. Then some refraction will happen. How it is going to happen, we'll see later. We know that refraction for sure is going to happen. When this is happening, Now this ray is going to act as the incident ray for the second refracting surface. Then what is the physical nature of the second refracting surface? Is it spherical or planar?
Planar.
It is planar. So if you are able to think of a device or design a transparent device in such a way that if the light needs to undergo refractions through two planar surfaces, can you call that as a prism? You're able to understand what I'm asking. Let's say I give you a glass material in your hand. Okay, let's as of now assume it is a cardboard. I'm giving you a cardboard in your hand. I'm asking you to cut the cardboard in such a way that this side of the cardboard and this side of the cardboard should have what structure? It should have a planar structure. So if both the refracting surfaces are planar in nature, can I call that material as a prism?
Sir, even for glass
Yes, sir.
slab, it is planar only now, sir.
Yes, sir.
I was about to tell that. That would have been my next point if you answered this. The reason I was stretching on that point is that only. Very good question. Anyways, so if you have a material where, if you have what material? A transparent material where where at least two refracting surfaces are what?
Inclined.
Planar.
Planar in nature. I didn't use the word inclined, Siddhar. Don't get confused. I never used the word inclined. I never used inclined. I'm saying two refracting surfaces are planar in nature. I'm only concerned about its shape. I'm only concerned about whether it is a plane or a curved surface. If one of the surfaces is curved, then I'll call it as a lens. If both the refracting surfaces are planar in nature, I'll call it as a prism. So keeping this point in mind, can I call a glass slab also as a prism?
Yes, sir. You can call it a rectangular prism.
Exactly. It's called as a rectangular prism. Very good. Okay, because why I stressed on this point is, whenever I tell prism, no, everybody will start drawing this triangle. No. So what is this actually? The one you are using in the lab is
Triangular prism.
it's a triangular prism. Okay, but this cannot classify the whole family of prisms. It is one of the types of prisms where the condition has to get satisfied. Both the refracting surfaces should be planar in nature. Okay, so our topic of discussion is restricted to triangular prism, and we have already discussed about rectangular prism, which is given another name called as a glass slab. That's it. It's called as a rectangular glass slab. That's it. But you should have this thing in your back end that it is a prism actually. Clear? So similarly, whatever is the type of shape you are giving to that particular prism, the prefix has to be added to it. For example, if I take something like this, if I say it's a transparent material, light has to undergo refraction through these two refracting surfaces. So what do I call this as?
Pentagonal prism.
It's a pentagonal prism, that's it. Generally, we don't use such names. So you're able to understand. So these things exist. So our topic of discussion is restricted to triangular prism. I hope you have clarity of what is a prism and how to define lens. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir? So write it down. So write down the definition in your own words with respect to a prism. If you want me to tell, I'll tell. Shall I dictate?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, write it down. So a transparent material with two planar refracting surfaces is called a prism. Okay. Now what we are going to see is, we are going to see certain terms that are related to what kind of a prism? A triangular prism. Okay. So let's say there is a triangular prism and this is there, no? This is what is called as angle of prism. The topmost portion is there, right? That is what is called as angle of prism. So you can ask me a question, does angle of prism needs to be 60 degrees always? Not necessary. It can be anything. Okay. Now I'm going to draw a ray diagram for it. I'm saying there is a light which is incident from the left hand side. It is incident on the first refracting surface. So what is the first step that we need to do?
Normal.
Normal at the point of incidence. So at the point of incidence, I'm drawing a normal. Okay. Then this would have been the actual path. If I take outside medium as air and this as a glass material whose refractive index is mu, light is traveling from
Rarer to denser medium.
rarer to denser. What is going to happen?
Towards the normal.
Towards the normal.
Bend towards a normal. So it is going to bend towards a normal. The next important question, when it is bending towards a normal, is it going to be parallel to the base? The answer is no. It is not always. Yes, but there is one particular scenario where the refracted ray will be parallel to the base. But you have to remember, when you're drawing a specific general diagram, you should ensure that it is not parallel to the base. So that is why I have slightly bent it like this. So I'm stressing on all these points because these are all the commonly made mistakes. You people also don't do it. Correct it, okay? So again, the ray is traveling from
Denser to rarer.
denser to rarer. This would have been the actual path. So it starts bending
Away.
Away from the normal.
away from the normal. I hope the diagram is clear. It's a very simple diagram. If I call this angle as A, this is called as angle of the prism. Right? Now, we need to take certain angles and find the relations. If I take this angle as I, then this angle will be called as R1. Accepted. So, the refracted ray within the prism is acting as the incident ray for the emergent ray. So, this is the incident ray. Inside is called as the refracted ray. And outside is called as the emergent ray. So the angle made by the incident ray with the normal is called angle of incidence. Angle made by the refracted ray with the normal is called as angle of refraction. Then what will be the name of the angle made by the emergent ray with the normal?
Angle of emergence.
So this is what we call it as angle of emergence. Okay. Now observe one important point. I'm using a different color. Observe. Okay, I'm using green. See, this is the actual path, right? So what do I mean by actual path? Had the prism concept not existed at all, the ray would have continued to move in the same straight line, right? In the direction of the green dotted lines. But what is the actual direction in which the ray is coming out? The ray is coming out in this way. So the ray which was supposed to go like this had started bending through a certain angle to come out finally as an emergent ray. Are you guys able to understand this? So the ray actually should have gone in this path. That is towards the angle of prism. The place where I've written this angle of prism. But what is happening to the ray? The ray is undergoing multiple refractions and it is coming out as an emergent ray. So when I retrace the emergent ray in the backward direction, there will be one point where the original ray and the incident ray and the emergent ray are meeting. So there, if I see, I am able to see that there is a slight anti-clockwise turn that has taken place to whom? to the actual path of the ray to finally come out from the emergent side. So this clockwise angle in this scenario is what is called as delta. Any idea about what is the name of it?
Angle of deviation.
Very good. It is called as angle of deviation. So how do we define this angle of deviation as? It is the angle between which two rays? Angle between incident ray and which ray?
Emergent ray.
Yes. So if you are able to see that, if you are able to measure the angle between the incident ray and the emergent ray, that angle is what is called as angle of deviation. Any doubt till this step? Any doubt in this ray diagram or whatever it is?
No,
Or any
sir.
terminology? Clear, right? Okay. So shall we derive? So this point, if I take it as A, if I take this point as B, if I take this point as C, and if I take this point as D, and let's say this point is E. Okay. Now, our first work is to find what is the relation between angle of deviation and other parameters. But let's think logically. Whenever you're deriving a formula, right, you should derive it in such a way. See, formula are generally derived so that you can do an experimental aspect and verify. Okay. So keeping this point in mind, tell me, what are all the quantities that are under our control? There are how many angles? I, R1, R2, E, and A. Out of these 5 angles, what are all the angles that are under our control, which we can control by changing the experimental setup?
I.
You
B.
can definitely, that's right. You can actually change the angle of incidence. It is up to you, because let's say you're using a laser light, you have kept it in such a way that it is making an angle theta here. You turn the laser light and keep it like this, you can control it. You can control the angle of incidence. You're able to understand this. So you can actually control it. That's right. What else is the other angle you can control?
Emergent
Angle.
ray.
You can actually control the angle of the prism. You can control the angle of prism, because choosing what kind of a prism you want is in your hands. So that whatever material you choose, the angle of the prism will change in accordance to it. Okay. So one is angle of incidence and the second is angle of prism. So we will try to derive the expressions mainly concentrating on these terms. Okay. And if at all you're doing an experiment, which angle is easy for you to measure? So I and A are under your control for sure. But what are all the angles that are easy for you to measure using a simple protractor?
R1.
You can calculate R1 and R2 you can't calculate, because where is R1 and R2?
No, inside.
It is inside the prism. We cannot put a protractor inside. But what is outside? I, E,
Angle of
and
emergence.
angle of emergence. Okay. So the angle of deviation that we are going to derive will be in terms of I, E, and A. Okay. Because these things we can experimentally do and verify also on a simpler note. So for that, what I'm going to do is, since we need the relation between the angles, we will go with simple geometry. That's it. So how many triangles you're able to see? There are multiple, but look at the triangles only from the labeled parts. So if I take the triangles, if I take the triangle B, D, and C, what is this angle, guys?
R1.
That's right, R1. What is this angle? R2. Then what is angle C? Is it not 180 minus of?
degrees.
It is 180 minus of R1 plus R2. Accepted? Now see, if I take the triangle BDE, E and D. Okay. Now tell me, how much is this angle?
I minus R1.
Very good. It is I minus R1 because if this is I, exactly the vertically opposite angle is also I. Then how much will be the remaining part? It is I minus R1. I hope everyone is clear with this. So I minus R1. In a similar way, what will this angle be?
E minus R2.
Very good. It is E minus R2. The same logic, vertically opposite angles. This whole thing will be E and this part will be E minus R2. Right? And outside angle is delta. Accepted? So outside angle is delta. What is the relation between delta I1, I minus R1, E minus R2? Exterior angle is equal to sum of, complete it. Exterior angle is equal to sum of opposite
Opposite
Interior
interior
angles.
angles.
interior angles. So delta is equal to I minus R1 plus E minus R2. So delta will be equal to I plus E minus of R1 plus R2. So let this be equation number 1. Let this be 2. I hope it is clear till this step. So we are trying to derive the angle of deviation. We got it in terms of I and E. But R1 and R2, it is difficult for us to measure in the experimental perspective. So we need to get R1 and R2 in terms of A. Right? If I need to get R1 and R2 in terms of A, then we need to introduce a quadrilateral ABCD. Observe. I'm taking the quadrilateral. Don't think it's a rhombus. It's some random shaped quadrilateral. Okay, ABCD, such that this angle is how much A? No doubt in that. What is angle C? It is 180 minus of R1 plus R2. Now tell me, what is angle B in the quadrilateral?
Sir, I
90 degree.
It is 90 because in the quadrilateral, the line at B, the line which is joining BC is actually the normal. So it is 90 degree. That is the reason why I drew the quadrilateral also like this. Similarly, what will happen to D?
90 degree.
90
Same
degree.
90 degrees. So here one important point you need to concentrate is B and D is common in all the triangles that we have considered. But in each scenario, the angle that it is subtending is different. Because we have taken different lines. In the first scenario, it is B and D joining, and B and D are joining in the first and the second case. But we have considered the triangle below B and D in the first case, in the second case above B and D. In the third case, B and D are not joining at all. B is joining to C, D is joining to C. So that is how the differences are. So from the quadrilateral concept, what can I conclude? A plus 90 plus 90 plus 180 minus of R1 plus R2 is how much?
360.
So 90, 90, 180, 360 gone. So A will be equal to R1 plus R2. This is a very important relation. There are problems asked based on this. So the sum of the two angles of refraction inside the prism is equal to how much? Should be equal to the angle of the prism. That is the meaning. So if I call this as third equation, then using 3 into, what do we get? Delta is equal to I plus E minus of, what is A? Sorry, R1 plus R2. It is A. So delta is equal to I plus E minus A. Is it clear? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Make a note of it. So in your schools, are they teaching practicals also through online or something?
No, sir.
Yes, sir.
No, right?
Sir,
Yes, sir.
they're sending you, sir.
Send what? They'll send what? Send videos.
No, sir, like kind of they are teaching, not
For us, they're
exactly.
sending videos, sir.
Videos. Okay.
And then they
Reason
just
I asked.
PDF for
Okay.
writing.
Okay. So you people are writing record, no? Because why I'm
Yes, sir.
asking is you
Record the
have
writing, but we didn't do experiment.
Teachers are
to
conducting this thing called OLab.
OLabs, they are taking.
OLabs is a simulation software. Yeah, it's a simulation.
Yeah, in that they are doing, sir.
Okay.
Like just to
That's-
get a hang of the experiment.
Understood. So you have Prism experiment. That is why I was asking. Okay. I hope it is clear. Shall I move on to the next concept? See, till now whatever we saw was the relation between all the angles. The next concept that we are going to see is called as angle of minimum deviation. Okay. So here, if you see the name, I'm talking about deviation. So angle of deviation is represented by delta, right? So if you read it in reverse, the deviation should be how much? It should be minimum, means it should be least. And that angle is what we are going to see. Or sometimes they will give it as condition for minimum deviation also. Now see, what will happen is the same logic again. You have a prism like this, okay? Now, when the ray is incident on the surface, I told you that this is the angle of incidence. Then this is the actual path. So how do you define angle of deviation as? It is the angle between the actual path, that is the incident ray, and the emergent ray. That's right. So I took one scenario in such a way, it is going like this. So emergent ray is coming out. When you try to extrapolate it, there's angle of emergence, there's angle of deviation, and all those things, right? So I hope you're able to understand till this step. Now the question is, what do we mean by angle of minimum deviation? Okay. So what exactly is coming in your mind? So when I need to call something as a minimum value, means I need to have a different set of data in my hand, right? For example, I give you numbers like this: 1, 5, 3, -2, 10. I have a set of numbers in my hand. I ask you what is the minimum value in this set. What will you say?
-2.
You will say -2 because you have some data in your hand. In a similar way, when you perform this experiment, my question is, will the value of delta for every particular repetition you're doing is going to be the same, or is it going to vary? You're able to understand my question? I'm not trying to ask, is my angle of deviation going to be constant for whatever angles of incidence I'm going to project the light upon? Try to understand my question. I'm trying to ask, will the value of delta be a constant or a variable?
Variable.
You can confidently say the answer if you look at the last expression that I derived in the previous derivation.
Variable.
It is variable. Why?
Because it depends on the angle of incidence and emergence.
It is dependent on angle of incidence. Though the angle of the prism is common, angle of emergence obviously depends on the angle of incidence. But angle of incidence is in whose hand? is in our hand, right? We can do the experiment. So if suppose I use I is equal to 35 degrees and I do an experiment, if I get, say, if I prepare a table like this, if I prepare a table between angle of incidence and the angle of deviation, let's say initially I'm using the light to be incident at 30 degrees. Let's say the angle of deviation I'm getting is delta 1. Then if I increase it to 35 degrees, my question is it still going to be delta 1? The answer to that is no. So what is exactly happening? By doing this activity, what exactly am I trying to collect?
Minimum deviation.
I'm trying to collect different values of deviation that is possible, right? So I'm trying to collect different deviations, delta 1, delta 2, like this. Generally, that is why we say when you're doing an experiment, you have to repeat them. Okay. So when you do that, you will get, let's say you're repeating it 5 times, then what will happen? You have 5 values of what? You have 5 values of the angle of deviations for which you would have used different angles of incidences. Right? You would have used different angles of incidence for which you have different angles of deviation. Correct? So if I ask you minimum deviation, what will your answer be? Use the same logic as this number. You're going to pick a value which is the least among the lot. For the time being, I thought the middle value is the least. I don't know what is the value. I'm just trying to explain it in a generic value. I hope you're able to understand what I'm trying to say. Right?
Yes, sir.
Right? So the question is, when this kind of a scenario is going to occur, how will the refracted ray inside be is the question. If you observe, no, when you do this activity, we can clearly say one thing, that when the incident light is like this and the emergent light is like this, how did I draw?
Parallel.
It is parallel to whom? It is exactly parallel to the base. So when you keep repeating the experiment, no, when you try to draw the ray diagram under all scenarios, there will be exactly one particular scenario where the refracted ray inside is going to be exactly parallel to the base, and at that time, if you calculate the angle of deviation, that will be the least deviation, which is given by the value delta min. Min stands for minimum. And this experiment, yes, you do it in the lab as well. You do a specific experiment like this. If you want, you can open the lab manual and try to connect it to what I'm trying to explain. You can do it after the class. Are you guys able to understand? So this is what is going to happen.
So what if incident is parallel to the base?
Incident ray is parallel to the base. What? I didn't get your question. You're trying to make the incident ray itself parallel to the base.
Yes, sir.
This is incident ray. This is incident ray.
What if it
This
is parallel to
refract.
base?
Then there is no question of minimum deviation. For minimum deviation to occur, it cannot be parallel to the base. If it is parallel to the basement, you need to measure what is the angle. Means your question is like this. It is like this. You're able to visualize. This is what you're asking. So in this scenario, there is no question of minimum deviation. So minimum deviation will occur only in the scenario where the refracted ray inside the prism is exactly parallel to the base. That can happen at some angle of incidence. We don't know what. When you do the experiment, you can find it out. For example, from the data that I've taken, maybe it is happening at 40 degrees. But this experiment will not be 100% accurate, because you can ask me, when you do the experiment, you will not get parallel to the base. And the reason for that is very specific, very simple. What are the angles? What is the difference between the consecutive angles we are taking? 40 and 45 degrees. We are taking the difference of 5 degrees. Maybe you can get this kind of a scenario at what point? You might get it at 42.5 degrees. Who knows? We are not even taking the trading, no. So what we can do is among the lot which you do in the experiment, whichever is giving you the least value, that is what you will report it in real-time basis. But theoretically, what is going to happen is, not only theoretically, this can be practically achieved also. If you do the reverse calculations, we can do that. So if you are able to adjust the angle of incidence in such a way that if the refracted ray inside the prism is exactly parallel to the base and the angle of emergence is exactly equal to the angle of incidence, then this kind of a scenario will give you the angle of deviation, which is going to be the least value. Are you guys able to understand this condition? So wherever you see minimum angle of deviation, this is the back end story that is going to happen. Are you guys able to understand or not? I want some response.
Yes, sir.
Right? So what are all the things that will happen? The angle of incidence will be equal to angle of emergence, and the refracted ray will be parallel to the base. And lastly, R1 and R2 will also be same. R1 is equal to R2. Angle of incidence will be equal to angle of emergence. And in this scenario, delta will be minimum. Okay. And the reason why we do this experiment is because that they will not do it in the lab. You will not even understand why you're doing. Your work is only till doing this experiment. They'll ask you to draw the graph. But the main reason and the real-time application of why we are doing this experiment is to find the refractive index of the material which you're using as a prism. Because I told you, no, not every prism is made up of glass. It can be made up of fiber also. It can be made up of some other material also. It's up to us. You can use any composition where you produce a transparent material. That's it. Okay. So for that material, if you need to calculate what is a refractive index, we need some experiment, right? That refractive index can be found from here. So how we are going to do it, I'll explain it now. Listen. So one thing you have to give me clarification. There is no doubt till this point.
No doubt, sir.
No doubt,
Yeah.
sir.
Okay, I'm proceeding. So the ray is undergoing refraction how many times? It is undergoing twice. But in this scenario, if you see, no, whatever refraction it is undergoing here is similar refraction on the other side also, because everything is exactly symmetric. Right? This side angle value is high. If it is 30 degrees, this side also the angle value is high, same 30 degrees. If this side angle R1, let's say it is 45 degrees, this side R2 is also 45. You're able to understand? So if I say R1 is equal to R2 is equal to R, if I say I is equal to E, I'm saying that we need to calculate the refractive index. Now we'll go back to the basic. What is a mathematical relation that is going to give us an explanation between the refractive indices and the angles?
Snell's law.
Yes. So when I apply Snell's law, at which boundary? You can apply it at any boundary. If I apply Snell's law at point A, tell me, 1 into sin I will be equal to mu into
sin
Sin
r.
R1.
R1. Sin R1 is nothing but R only. So I've directly taken, correct? Which implies mu is equal to sin I divided by sin R. But the question is, if I need to do it with sin I by sin R, I could have directly used Snell's law. Why are we doing this activity? Right? So question is, we need to write I and R in terms of all the parameters that you're using in this particular experiment. So let's say what are all the parameters that you're using? So if I take this as 1, now I know that I is equal to E, and in the previous derivation, I told you A is equal to R1 plus R2. I told you it is important also. So when I say A is equal to R1 plus R2, but R1 plus R2 is nothing but R. So A will be 2R. So R is how much? A by 2. Accepted? In a similar way, we know that delta is equal to I plus E minus A, which implies, in this case, what is delta? Delta is least, delta minimum is equal to, and some books give it as delta m. Okay, it's up to you. Delta minimum is equal to what?
2i minus y.
So it is 2i. It is 2i minus a, which implies I is equal to how much? A plus delta minimum divided by 2. Accepted? So let this be equation number 2 and let this be equation number 3. Just give me a second. Correct? Now if I use 3 and 2 in 1, what do we get? Mu will be equal to sine I. In the place of I can write it as A plus delta minimum by 2 by sine R. R is how much? A by 2. Now if you observe, this is going to be the formula of the refractive index of the prism. Under what scenario? Under the condition of minimum deviation. So if you're clear with this, please let me know. I'll share this document immediately after class. If you're clear with this, I just want to explain one more small point in this. With that, prism is over.
It's clear, sir.
Clear, right? Okay. Now, if you observe, no? If you try to plot, so once you do this activity, you get this table, no? With this table, what you do is, you will actually plot a graph like this. So whenever you are plotting a graph, I would have told this many times, what should be taken on x-axis? Independent variables. So among I and delta, which is independent? Independent means which is under our control.
I.
So I will be taken here and delta will be taken here. So as you keep changing the value of I, you can observe a graph like this. You will observe a graph in this way. Means what will happen is, as you increase the value of I, the value of angle of deviation will be decreasing. It will reach a least value and again it will start increasing. Okay. And this least value is what is called as delta minimum. You can refer this in your lab manual or the notes, record book, whatever you're writing. So this angle is called as angle of minimum deviation. At this point only, I is equal to E. And one more important point to be noted here is, when you draw a line parallel to x-axis, we can understand that for the same angle of deviation, or I'll put it in reverse, you can get the same angle of deviation for two angles of incidences. Sorry, for two angles of incidence. Means I1 might be 30 degrees, I2 might be, let's say, 62 degrees. For I1 is equal to 30 and I2 is equal to 62 degrees, what is the angle of deviation you're achieving? It will be delta. But there will be only one particular angle of incidence where only one angle of deviation is possible. What is that point? That is the point where the angle of incidence is equal to angle of deviation. And there is only one minimum value, obviously, right? In a lot, there can only be one least value. And that is what is happening. Am I clear, guys?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So this is all about prism. I thought I can do few problems, but I have another class immediately after this. So if you're clear with this, what I will do is I'll share this whole document. So the advantage with this document is you have the content here and immediately you have questions here. So you can go through them. You can try those problems. So I think, let me check how many problems are there. There are 8 problems. You can try them. Next class I will discuss. And the last topic that is pending is optical instrument, that is simple microscope, compound and telescope. With that, this chapter is over. So if you're clear with things, we can wind up.
Clear, sir.